Part 21. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 201. These days, Greifang and the others have been playing in the back mountain all day, mainly practicing hunting skills, and often send the prey they caught to Suming. Sometimes it is a small wild rabbit, sometimes it is half a mountain mouse, and even wild fruits. These things are not very useful, but barbecue is still quite good, so Suming often eats wild game during this period, and he is a little tired of it. The piece of copper in front of him is dirty and looks like a rag. It can't be eaten or sold. I don't know where the dogs found it. Suming took the copper block and walked into the water pavilion. He turned on the faucet to rinse off the mud on it. With the help of the light, he saw that the copper block was an arc-shaped thing, rusty, with some unclear patterns on it. It looks like a fragment, maybe a small piece of a vessel. Did you pick it up from the back mountain? Suming laughed and asked Wang Ke. Wang Ke stuck out his tongue and nodded. Suming muttered, "It can't be an antique," and then put the fragment on the table at the side. How can there be so many antiques in the world? Can a few dogs just run around and pick up antiques? Besides, there are many imitations these days, even modern furniture has a lot of antiques. It is not too rare to find fragments of ancient bronzes in the mountains. I played games online for a while and fell asleep. The next morning, just after dawn, I heard the sound of claws scratching on the door panel, creaking one after another. Suming rubbed his eyes and got out of bed and opened the door of the waterside pavilion. "Oh my God, did you move the garbage dump here?" Suming was shocked by the scene in front of him. At the door of the waterside pavilion, there was a pile of broken porcelain bowls and broken bronzes covered with mud. The wolf dog brother was holding a rotten rag in his mouth, standing in front of the pile of rubbish, wagging his tail at Suming. Suming felt something was wrong. There was no one in the back mountain area. Where did they get so much garbage that looked like daily necessities? Looking more closely, the rag in the wolfdog brother's mouth seemed to be a piece of clothing. Suming took the rag from the wolfdog brother's mouth, and a rotten smell came to his nose, and it was a bit foul. He covered his nose and shook it twice against the wind. When he unfolded it, it was indeed a piece of clothing that looked like an ancient robe, with strange embroidery patterns on it, but the clothes were seriously decayed and could not be seen at all. Seeing this thing, Suming was a little uneasy. Fortunately, the zoo was not open yet, and there was no ghost near the waterside pavilion. He quickly moved the broken plates and bowls, including the rag, to the waterside pavilion. If it was just one or two pieces of porcelain, or a few pieces of broken copper, it would not be surprising, but such a large pile of things in front of him was too abnormal. Especially since they were obviously dug out of the soil, it made people more suspicious. You know, the back mountain is a branch of the Qinling Mountains. The Qinling Mountains can be said to be one of the birthplaces of the entire Chinese nation and the largest dragon vein. Since ancient times, many ancient cities have been built around the Qinling Mountains, and many emperors and generals have chosen to build their tombs in the Qinling Mountains. Even if they are not emperors and generals, there are countless cities and towns built on the mountains, so there are quite a lot of ancient tombs in the Qinling Mountains. Due to the ruggedness and difficulty of travel, most places have not been visited by people until today, and it is not surprising if some mysterious things appear. The wild man Suming was found in the Qinling Mountains. Suming's heart was shocked. Could this group of dogs have dug up someone's grave? People of his age have read a lot of novels and movies about tomb robbing, and immediately thought of tomb robbing adventures. However, tomb robbing sounds exciting, but in fact it is not as interesting as described in novels. After more contact with Zhao Yun, Suming knew that the so-called tomb robbing is actually a dangerous and boring job. Not only are there huge safety hazards, the key is that it is not as profitable as imagined. First of all, most of the tombs are buried underground. After hundreds of years, the burial objects inside have long been dilapidated. The appearance of antiques is very important. The same Ming Suanhua, a complete one, and a damaged or even broken one, have a huge difference in price. For example, the pile of junk in front of us is almost all broken pieces. Things of this quality, even if they are antiques, are not worth much money. Secondly, there are not many valuable things in the lower grade tombs, but in a few high-end tombs, such as the emperors and generals, some good things may be found, even the so-called artifact national treasure level, such as the Simuwa Ding, the Jinluyi and so on. But this kind of thing is priced but not marketed, and the true value is hard to estimate, but if you take it secretly to buy, it is difficult to find a buyer, and it may only be a few million in the end, and you have to risk losing your head. Like the level of the 12 animal heads, an auction can sell for hundreds of millions, and most of them are hyped. I once heard Zhao Yun tell me an example. A few years ago, a group of professional tomb robbers dug several tombs from the Ming and Qing dynasties. The burial objects were quite rich, with dozens of pieces in total, but they only made about 1 million or 2 million. In the end, they were caught and sentenced to more than 15 years. Even if Su Ming lives a stable life and does nothing, he can still make tens of millions a year. There is no need for him to resell cultural relics for these millions or tens of millions, risking his life and going against the whole country. Zhao Yun is the best example. He manages the museum, and it would be convenient for him to resell some national treasure level cultural relics, but Zhao Yun would never do that. It's a simple truth. The money he can make from legitimate business is far more than the crooked way. Then again, Su Ming didn't know what the pile of things in front of him were. The so-called antiques were just his guess, maybe they were just a bunch of useless modern imitations. Let's go, take me to the place where these things were found. Su Ming was about to follow the Wolfdog brothers to the back mountain. As soon as he went out, the phone rang. It was Zhao Yun who called and said that he had some things about the winery to discuss with him and asked if he had time to go there. Su Ming thought about it. If there really was an ancient tomb or something, he had no experience at all. It would be too dangerous to go rashly. What's more, he was doing well now. He didn't expect to make money by reselling cultural relics, nor did he need to commit crimes for a few cultural relics. His biggest hope was to go on an adventure and play with them if he really found an ancient tomb. So I just took a bag of garbage and drove to Zhao Yun's place, and let him identify it, and then I'll see what to do next. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 202. After arriving at Zhao Yun's house, Zhao Yun was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper. After changing his shoes and entering the house, Su Ming did not mention identifying antiques first, but talked to Zhao Yun about the winery. For now, this is the business. Zhao Yun has already found professional engineers and budget personnel, and has made a plan for the factory construction, as well as relevant approval procedures. Su Ming has previously transferred 4 million from the Daowen Fishery Company's account through Zhang Siming's law firm, plus 2 million from Su Ming's own pocket, a total of 6 million. Once this money was taken out, Su Ming is now completely a pauper. If it weren't for the monthly salary at the zoo and the continued cruise business, he couldn't even afford to refuel the Wrangler. The fishery company's account is completely empty, and it can only wait for the subsequent recovery of the money from the sale of fish. He originally planned to go to several inland lakes in the Yangtze River basin before the new year to find some freshwater fish with higher economic value to breed. Now, due to the tight economy, the plan has been temporarily shelved. Zhao Yun invested 5 million yuan by himself, and the total investment of the two of them was 11 million yuan. For a winery, the scale is actually very, very small. The funds have been in place, but there are two problems. The first is the formula. You mentioned last time that you need to hurry up with the monkey training. Su Ming nodded. I have already started to do it. He had asked the zoo warehouse to order several tons of various fruits last week. He didn't know which fruits the old Monkey King would need to make wine, but it would be better to prepare more. The formula is the key to the winery, which directly affects whether it can make money. Su Ming is sure to let the old Monkey King provide the formula, but in order to create a gimmick, this time it is not only the old Monkey King who will take action. Su Ming is also thinking about getting a few more monkeys out, and letting them learn to brew monkey wine with the old Monkey King in the back mountain under the name of releasing them to the wild. In the future, let these monkeys who can brew wine go to the winery to work. As long as these gimmicks are created, the winery can't say that it will be big and listed in the future, but it is definitely a sure thing to make money. And the monkeys seem to like the work of making wine, probably because they could eat a lot of fruits. And the land for the factory. Speaking of the land, Zhao Yun showed some embarrassment. He did choose a few plots of land, but the geographical location was not very ideal, so they could only be regarded as backup options. If there was no other way, he would use those plots of land. According to the spirit of the city, all land must be listed for bidding and auctioned publicly. Slightly better land can only be bought by bidding. If so, our investment is only enough to buy land. I have an idea. Can we rent a piece of land from the back mountain of your zoo? Anyway, it doesn't matter whether the winery is remote or not, and there is no need to be in the prosperous city. I have to think of a way. Su Ming was also a little embarrassed. The back mountain was allocated to the zoo, and the zoo has the right to use it. With his current status in the zoo, it is not difficult to allocate a piece of land to do something else. But there is a premise. The back mountain exists in the name of an animal protection area. If you build a farm to grow pollution-free crops, it is still reasonable. However, building modern industries such as factories and wineries will definitely bring some pollution, which is a problem in terms of policy. How about finding a piece of land near the reservoir? Su Ming asked thoughtfully. It is close to the water source and the transportation nearby is relatively convenient. It is better to build a factory near the reservoir than in the back mountain. There are several ready-made plots of land around the reservoir ready for auction, but as far as I know, the city now wants to plan these lands for residential use instead of industrial land, Zhao Yun said. According to the government's plan, different lands are used for different purposes. Industrial land and residential land, as the name suggests, the former is used to build factories, and the latter is used to build commercial housing. After buying the land, it must be built according to the plan. It is not possible to buy industrial land and build commercial housing, and vice versa. It is illegal. Although there are only two words that are different, the prices of residential land and industrial land are worlds apart. The price of residential land is several times that of industrial land. Now a large part of the government's fiscal revenue is obtained by auctioning state-owned land. The price of residential land is rising every year, and new land kings and building kings are constantly appearing. This is also a major reason for the high housing prices. The government says every year that it wants to control housing prices, but the price of land accounts for more than half of the cost of housing, and there are dozens of various taxes. If the land price and taxes do not fall, how can housing prices fall? Back to business. The area around Huading Reservoir is far away from the hustle and bustle of the city, with pleasant scenery and quiet environment. It is perfect for building villas. It is reasonable for the government to plan the surrounding land as residential land and buy more money to make fiscal revenue. With Zhao Yun's current status, he definitely has a very powerful relationship in the government. Su Ming estimates that 80% of his background is much greater than his own. However, changing the land use around the reservoir from residential to industrial is related to the fiscal revenue of the entire Yangchuan municipal government. This is a lifeline issue and a matter of principle. Even if Zhao Yun came forward, he might not be able to do it. Zhao Yun probably knew this in his heart. Finally, he shook his head and smiled and said, if it really doesn't work, it's the same to buy a piece of land somewhere else. There are plenty of construction land in nearby counties and towns. If the money is in place, there is no need to worry about not being able to buy it. It's just that the transportation of raw materials is a bit troublesome. I'll think of a way after I go back. If possible, it'd be better to build it near the reservoir or the back mountain. Su Ming still hopes that the winery can be closer to him for easy control. And if he can build a winery in these two places, he can even plant a large area of various fruits and vegetables in the back mountain and directly supply the winery with wine. It is convenient and makes use of the back mountain, killing two birds with one stone. The two chatted for a while. As parents, they always talk about their children. Zhao Yun is the same. He talked about Cheng Cheng. Su Ming was stunned. Nowadays, children are also very precocious. In Cheng Cheng's class, there is actually a little boy who wrote a love letter to her. Zhao Yun didn't care much. It's normal for children to have that kind of hazy feeling. Not to mention the children nowadays, even when Su Ming and his friends were in elementary school, there were often rumors about who liked whom. But Zhao Qian was very nervous. She whispered to Zhao Yun every day, saying that early love would delay learning and affect the outlook on life. Bala bala. Uncle Zhao, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Beating and intimidating little friends, helping with homework, pretending to be a parent to attend a parent-teacher meeting, these are my specialties, 50 for each time. Su Ming slapped his chest loudly. Forget it, Cheng Cheng didn't like those kids anyway, saying they were too childish, playing League of Legends all day long, not mature at all, Zhao Yun said indifferently. Su Ming was speechless, thinking that I also play, not only League of Legends, but sometimes I also cross the line of fire. After a few words of idle talk, Su Ming saw that Zhao Yun had nothing serious to say, so he took out a few pieces of broken porcelain, broken copper and so on from his bag, piled them on the table, and said, Uncle Zhao, can you help me see what these are? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 203. Zhao Yun and Su Ming sat on both sides of the big table, facing each other. Seeing Su Ming pouring out a lot of bits and pieces from his bag, Zhao Yun glanced at it casually at first, but soon he frowned. When he got up, his expression suddenly became serious. He dragged the chair over and sat next to Su Ming. He picked up the small fragments and looked at them carefully one by one. Looking at Zhao Yun's expression, Su Ming knew that these things were probably not ordinary, at least not modern imitations, so he asked, Uncle Zhao. However, Zhao Yun directly asked, where did you find these things? Wait, come to my study upstairs and tell me. Without saying anything else, he packed these things up again and carried them up to the second floor. Su Ming followed suit. The two walked into the study, and Zhao Yun locked the study door. Uncle Zhao, even if it's really an antique, there's no need to make such a fuss, it's just like being a thief, Su Ming joked. Was it necessary to lock the door in his own home and Cheng Cheng and Zhao Qian were not at home? I'm doing this for your own good. You don't think I can tell? These are all things that come from the soil. If word gets out, you will be guilty of a big crime. Zhao Yun glared at Su Ming angrily, you kid, please don't read too many novels and learn how to rob tombs. Let me tell you, the country has dedicated people to take care of this kind of thing. If you have something worth a little bit, you can't do it. If you take action, you will be targeted. Is there really a dragon group? Su Ming suddenly became excited, thinking that I can be regarded as a person with special abilities. If there is a dragon group, I will join it. Dragon group? What is it? People of Zhao Yun's age obviously don't know what the dragon group is. He didn't think deeply about it, but reminded Su Ming once again not to resell antiques privately. The country has special people to manage these matters secretly. If it is an ordinary antique, that's it. If it reaches the level of national treasure, with Su Ming's current approach, we have to catch him before he sells the country. It's so mysterious, but it's not necessarily an antique. Su Ming didn't care, since he had never thought of making money from this. Zhao Yun turned on an incandescent lamp in the corner of the study room and took out a magnifying glass. Under the bright light, he carefully inspected the rags Su Ming had sent. Then he opened the drawer and took out a small, palm-sized small bottle. I used a small brush to dip some unknown liquid from the bottle, brushed it a few times on a piece of copper, and looked at it carefully under the light. How's it going? Although Su Ming didn't expect to make money from this, he was still curious and asked a little nervously. If this weren't an antique, there wouldn't be any antiques in the world. Zhao Yun put down the small copper piece, pointed it with his finger, and said, "It should be something from the middle and early Ming dynasty. Tell me the truth, how did it come about?" Su Ming didn't hide anything, and told Zhao Yun what happened like pouring beans through a bamboo tube. After Zhao Yun listened, he pondered for a while and said, "Judging from what you said, there should be a tomb in the back mountain. But judging from the patterns on the fragments you sent, the owner of the tomb should not be a prince or general. Xiang, you are just an ordinary person, at most you have some money. Fortunately, you did not take the initiative to dig the tomb, otherwise the nature would be different. I tell you, this kind of tomb has good archaeological value, but it really has no economic value. It's amazing that after half a day's effort, the items dug out can be sold for hundreds of thousands. Looking at what you said, I have been influenced by you all day long. Now I have a red heart pointing towards the sun. I have never thought about robbing tombs," Su Ming said with a smile. "You won't believe it even if I tell you. I also thought about what would happen if the tomb owner was killed. It was dug out, so I did a good deed and buried it for him. Hey, I'm just going to pretend to believe you. Anyway, no one knows what treasures are in the tomb now." "Uncle Zhao, you understand me," Su Ming said with a playful smile. If there is something particularly rare and valuable, Su Ming will definitely not suffer a loss given his character. And Su Ming also knew very well that Zhao Yun was a businessman, and businessmen all have a profit-seeking nature. After all, this middle-aged handsome guy is not the kind of person who devotes himself wholeheartedly to the interests of the party and the country. Zhao Yun thought for a while and said, "In this case, you take me to that place to have a look first, and then we can talk about other things after we find the tomb." "What else?" Su Ming keenly caught something unusual in Zhao Yun's words and asked deliberately, "What else?" Zhao Yun blinked and asked, "Don't you want to go to the ancient tomb and have a look in person before the country excavates it? You have to know that after the country excavates it, many first-hand information will become top-secret files, even if I may not have the chance to see it." "Uncle Zhao, you are tempting me to rob a tomb," Su Ming laughed. Zhao Yun's expression became serious and he said seriously, "That's nonsense. If you go to dig the grave, that's called grave robbing. I'll take you to dig the grave. That's called protective excavation. I have a certificate." Su Ming was so out of breath that he cried. It was so irritating that people were more powerful than others. Zhao Yun really had the proof. A National Cultural Relics Excavation and Protection Qualification Certificate that I have never heard of. With this thing, graves can be dug legally. Of course, stealing cultural relics from the tomb was not an option. The problem was, if he and Su Ming were the only two people to get down to the tomb first, who would know what they were doing inside? Zhao Yun was calmer than Su Ming after all, and he was a professional. Before leaving, he made a phone call and had 2 large backpacks of equipment and tools delivered. The young man who delivered the things seemed to be Zhao Yun's confidant. After he came, he said nothing and asked nothing. He just left the things and turned around and left. With these things, the two left the Zhao family villa, drove back to the zoo to pick up Su Meng, and then let two wolfhounds lead the way to the back mountain. After drilling in the deep mountains and old forests for several hours, the wolfhound brothers who led the way finally stopped in a small mountain stream and barked at the hillside next to them. The current location is just between a hilltop under the name of the zoo and another hilltop used by the zoo but not owned by the zoo. The two hilltops formed a V shape, and Su Ming and his team are now at the bottom of the V. To put it more vividly, it is in the career line groove. There is no road around, the terrain on both sides is quite steep, at least 40 degrees, the hillside is full of trees and rocks, and from a distance you can see a large area of bare ground exposed by the landslide caused by the impact of mountain torrents at a height of 50 to 60 meters on the hillside, like a very abrupt bald patch in the green. From this distance, there are a few small black dots like dogs on the bald ground, barking at the ground. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 204. What is that? Su Ming squinted his eyes to look over. It was too far away, so he couldn't see what the dogs were barking at. Zhao Yun was straightforward, let's go up the mountain and see what's going on. So the two of them climbed up the slope with their hands and feet. The slope was at least 40 degrees, and it was almost impossible to climb up without using hands and feet. Su Ming and Zhao Yun threw all the backpacks and equipment to Su Meng, who rushed up like a big ape. Zhao Yun and Su Ming followed behind, climbing for nearly half an hour before they reached the slope that was dozens of meters high. Strangely, there was no ancient tomb in front of them. There was only a hole about the size of a water tank on the ground. Several dogs surrounded the hole, leaning down slightly, staring at the hole as if they were facing a great enemy, as if there was something very dangerous inside. On the slope around the hole, some ancient utensils were scattered, half buried in the soil. It seems that the rags that the wolf-dog brothers brought to Su Ming were picked up nearby. Zhao Yun and Su Ming looked at each other in surprise, and at the same time, a thought came to their minds, could this hole be a robbery hole? Seeing Su Ming coming, Huiya turned back and grinned at Su Ming, revealing sharp fangs from his lips. This intimate gesture scared Zhao Yun. He didn't notice at first that there was a real wolf among these dogs. It's okay, I raised it. Su Ming patted Huiya's head and said with a smile. Zhao Yun was relieved to see that Huiya didn't bite people, so he walked to the hole and looked down. Su Ming also walked to the hole carefully and bravely looked inside. This position can be illuminated by sunlight. Looking down with the sunlight, it is dark inside and seems to be very deep. Waves of cool air hit the face, and it seems to be water underneath. Zhao Yun picked up a fist-sized stone and threw it into the cave. Soon, a plop sound came from the cave. The sound of the stone falling into the water was not dull, and the accumulated water should not be very deep. Su Ming was a little scared, but more of it was curiosity. He couldn't help asking Zhao Yun, how about we go down and take a look? Zhao Yun, although he usually looks like a mature uncle and a successful person, is actually not lacking in the spirit of adventure in his bones. Moreover, he is an antique researcher. When he was young, he was used to wild. Later, he had a family and took on the responsibilities of a father and husband, and gradually became stable. Facing the big hole in front of him, Zhao Yun's heart was also like a cat's claw scratching. The two hit it off and decided to go down to explore. Zhao Yun prepared various tools on the side, but Su Ming held Gray Fang and muttered a few words. You are not going to take the wolf down, Zhao Yun put on the miner's hat with a searchlight on his head and asked curiously. That's a good idea. Su Ming thought that what Zhao Yun said made sense. Wild animals are born with a keen intuition of danger, and Gray Fang has night vision. In a dark environment, it can play a much greater role than humans. However, what he just told Gray Fang was another matter. Gray Fang ran away quickly with a few dogs. Su Ming was worried about what would happen next, and Zhao Yun couldn't accept it, so he deliberately gave a shot of prevention and said, Uncle Zhao, you don't think there will be any zombies or dumplings in here, do you want to prepare some weapons? You have watched too many movies, there is no such thing. If there is really a tomb below, the real danger comes from the mechanism and the air, and at most there are a few mountain rats. Zhao Yun casually threw a flashlight more than 1 foot long to Su Ming. This thing is heavy in the hand, and can be used as an iron rod to smash. Su Ming still looked worried and said, I'd better prepare some weapons. Whatever you want, Zhao Yun said. It was indifferent. He had seen many young men like Su Ming who were excavating ancient tombs for the first time. Their minds were full of all kinds of strange fantasies. They wanted to go into the ancient tombs fully armed, like fighting Iraq. In fact, in the tomb, the role of weapons is far less important than experience. After a while, Huiya came back with the dog, holding 2 large waterproof bags, and threw them in front of Su Ming. Su Ming opened the bag, Zhao Yun took a casual look, and was dumbfounded. He said in a daze, the weapons you are talking about, are these? The bag really contained serious weapons, 2 pistols, 2 rifles, and 2 boxes of tightly packed bullets. They were all seized from the poaching gang last time and had been hidden in the big cave. Huiya knew the way and took some of them with the dog. He. Su Ming laughed a few times without knowing what was going on. He put a rifle on his back and a pistol on his waist, then threw the bag to Zhao Yun. If it were an ordinary person, he would inevitably ask a lot of questions at this time, but Zhao Yun had seen these things when he was young. There was also a tacit understanding between him and Su Ming, and they rarely asked each other's secrets under normal circumstances. He picked up a rifle casually, pulled the bolt twice very skillfully, and made an aiming motion. Not bad, but it's best not to shoot. If there is a tomb below, it's easy to hurt yourself with a ricochet bullet. Zhao Yun put the gun on his back, pulled the climbing rope on his waist, handed the other end of the rope to Su Ming, and prepared to go down to explore the depth of the water in the cave first. As a result, before he went down the cave, Huiya had already taken a step ahead and rushed directly into the cave entrance. There was a sound of falling into the water, followed by the sound of paddling. Su Ming quickly lay down at the entrance of the cave and turned on the flashlight to shine down. In the flashlight, Grey Fang swam quickly in the water, and soon swam to the depths of the cave and disappeared. Then there was a slight sound of shaking fur and Grey Fang's cry to report safety. Down, Zhao Yun slid into the cave on the climbing rope without saying a word. Su Ming shone the flashlight on him. He sank 2 or 3 meters, then touched the water surface, and his body slowly sank into the water. When the water was about to flood his chest, Zhao Yun finally stopped sinking and made an okay gesture to Su Ming. Su Ming used a hammer to hit the nail that fixed one end of the climbing rope to the ground into the soil, and then slid down along the climbing rope, his feet sinking into the water little by little. I don't know if it's a psychological effect, even through the water discharging suit, I can feel the cold water in the cave. Soon, with a slight push of his feet, he had already stepped on the bottom of the water. Su Ming and Zhao Yun were about the same height, both about 1.77 meters tall, and the water in the cave just didn't reach their chests. Finally, Su Ming jumped down directly, like a human bomb, splashing a large ball of water. The cave was pitch black. It was Su Ming's first time to come to such a place. He was a little nervous. He held the gun tightly in one hand and raised it above the water. He turned his head and looked around. Suddenly, he found that there were 2 balls of ghost-like lights floating in the air about 20 to 30 meters ahead. Oh my, Su Ming was startled and almost shouted. But the 2 balls of ghost-like lights shouted first. Zhao Yun used a flashlight bucket to shine, and it turned out to be Grey Fang. About 20 meters ahead was the shore. Grey Fang had already landed on the shore. He yawned boredly, licked his mouth with his tongue, and then stretched his waist and lay on the ground waiting for Su Ming and the others. The 2 balls of ghost-like lights were its eyes. Su Ming also quickly turned on the flashlight and shone it around. Above his head was a cave that looked like a slope. There was not much space behind and on both sides. It was only 7 or 8 meters away from the cave wall. Only the front was very open. Behind a not so large area of water was the shore. The space on the shore seemed to be very large. When the flashlight flickered, he could vaguely see the dilapidated buildings, but it was too far away to see what they were. Go ashore and take a look. Zhao Yun gestured and took the lead in walking forward in the chest-deep water. Su Meng was the last to hold the line. Su Ming was the most timid, so he walked obediently in the safe position in the middle. The three of them walked slowly forward in the water. The cave echoed with a slight gurgling sound of water. Waves of water rippled out from Su Ming and his friends to the water surface in all directions. As the three walked forward, the cave echoed with a slight sound of water flow. The water was not deep, but since there were only 2 flashlight beams in the cave and no other light, the water surface looked dark and too calm, giving people the feeling that some monster would jump out at any time. Probably because of the years of accumulated water, and the fact that the cave was not well ventilated, there was always a smell of corruption in the air, which smelled very uncomfortable. Fortunately, Huiya on the shore had been lying lazily, and did not seem to notice any danger. The bottom of the water should be a slope. The closer you go to Huiya, the shallower the water around you will be. Not long after, Zhao Yun, who was walking in the front, half of his body was exposed to the water, and the water reached the thighs of him and Su Ming. Just as they were about to go ashore, suddenly, a slight sound of water came from the other side of the pool, as if something was sliding into the water. At the same time, Huiya, who had been lying on the ground, shuddered, stood up, and the hair on his neck exploded, and roared at Su Ming and the others behind him. The water surface on the side split to the sides without warning, splashing water, and it seemed that something under the water was rushing towards Su Ming and his friends. In the blink of an eye, before Su Ming and his friends could react, the underwater thing had already reached Su Ming's side, and was about to hit his waist. At the end, Su Ming roared wildly, stretched out his arms, grabbed Su Ming with one hand and Zhao Yun with the other, raised his arms high, and actually lifted the 2 people out of the water, and then threw them forward with force. Su Ming and Zhao Yun only felt that the whole person flew up in the clouds, followed by the 2 people falling heavily on the shore with a plop. Su Ming was about to rush to the shore, but just after taking a step, he suddenly seemed to be bitten from behind by something, and was dragged back suddenly, and the whole person fell into the water and sank into the water all of a sudden. P.S. Don't worry if this paragraph does not count the words. Let me first talk about the update rules after the release. It is still 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. every day, with a minimum of 6,000 words. Of course, I will add more chapters frequently. There is no rule for adding more chapters, anyway, I will try my best to write. In addition, the average subscription of this book just exceeded 1,000 in the early morning of today. This is a great encouragement for newcomers. Here, I will tell you the truth. Because there was no recommendation some time ago, I was a little confused when I was writing, so some plots were not very satisfactory. From now on, the manuscripts are basically exhausted. I will treat this book with a more serious attitude and will never let you down. No more nonsense. Today's update. 2 chapters in the morning, 2 chapters in the evening, 3,000 words per chapter, a total of 12,000. Let's work together and move towards an average subscription of 1,500. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 205. Su Ming and Zhao Yun were thrown onto the shore. Su Ming felt something was wrong. He gritted his teeth and looked back. He saw a figure flashing in the dark, and a large group of waves appeared on the water. Su Ming's tall body was dragged from behind by something, and he fell backwards and disappeared on the water in an instant. Su Ming was furious. Although Su Ming was a wild man picked up, he was simple and kind. He almost ate and lived with him. The relationship between the two was no worse than that of real brothers. What's more, Su Meng was attacked from behind by the thing in the water just now in order to save himself and Zhao Yun. He didn't know whether Su Meng was fainted or dead. After being dragged into the water, there was no sign of struggle, and the water surface immediately calmed down. With the help of the flashlight, only a faint ripple could be seen extending to the depths of the pool, as if the underwater monster dragged Su Meng into the water. Grey Fang howled, arched its body, and was about to jump into the water. Zhao Yun hurriedly stopped it. On the shore, Grey Fang might still have the strength to fight, but in the water, Grey Fang didn't even have the ability to protect itself. Su Meng didn't dare to use his gun now, for fear that he would hit Su Meng with a random attack, so he quickly poured his mental power into the water. The water was gloomy and cool, and there was no sign of any other biological activity. Fortunately, Su Meng's mental power was strong enough now, and he quickly locked Su Meng and the underwater creature in the farthest corner. With just mental power, it was impossible to tell what it was, but it felt that it was very large, almost the same size as a giant salamander. As soon as it came into contact with the mental power, the underwater monster immediately seemed to have been greatly provoked, and fiercely counterattacked with a fierce consciousness. With Su Meng's current mental strength, he could control even a tiger, but the monster in the water suddenly counterattacked, and Su Meng was dizzy and dazed. He swayed twice and fell to the ground. There are only three possibilities for this situation: either the monster in the water has a very high intelligence, even close to that of humans, or the age of this monster is older than normal. As the saying goes, people are old and trees are old, and animals tend to be spiritual when they are old, and have a strong resistance to mental power. There is another possibility that the target is surprisingly large, such as a big whale or elephant, but this guy in the water, although not small in size, is obviously not as big as a whale. This possibility can be ruled out. But now Su Meng has no time to think so much. Saving Su Meng is the most important thing. Just now, a small part of his mental power came into contact with Su Meng, and found that Su Meng was still alive, but he was just temporarily unconscious. It is very likely that his head hit a stone under the water when he fell. So regardless of anything, he gritted his teeth and condensed all his mental power together, and released it all without reservation. Su Meng's mental power is now incomparable to that of the past. With the nourishment of the big blue honey and monkey wine, he is getting stronger day by day. He hits with all his strength, and the invisible and intangible mental power is like a small cannonball, fiercely bombarding the underwater monster. This kind of mental power attack is not physical damage, but is directly projected into the depths of consciousness. If it were an ordinary beast, even a bear or a lion, Su Meng might have become an idiot. Although the monster in the water is fierce, it can't stand it. It immediately let go of Su Meng and twisted its body wildly, seeming to be in great pain. After Su Meng released this mental power, he felt exhausted all over and almost fell down. He held the ground and gasped for breath. Zhao Yun was not idle here either. He quickly installed a tool like a grabber at one end of the climbing rope, and threw it hard after seeing the position of the splash on the water surface. The grabber dragged the climbing rope over the water surface, just landed at the position of the splash, and sank into the water. This kind of gripper looks like a hand, very similar to the flying tiger claws used in ancient times to climb over walls, but in fact it is very delicately designed. Several claws are bent 360 degrees. Once touched by this thing, it will be immediately caught, even a slippery fish cannot escape. Zhao Yun's meaning is very clear. Whether it is to catch the monster, or to catch Su Meng, or both, as long as they can be dragged ashore, it will be easy. The claws are made of metal and sink into the water quickly. Zhao Yun pulled back with both hands, and the climbing rope was immediately straightened. Sure enough, something was caught. He hurriedly pulled back, and Huiya followed behind, biting the climbing rope, his forelegs were tense, and he kicked on the ground to help pull. The rope was obviously caught by a heavy object, but there was no struggle on the other end in the water, so it should be caught by Su Meng. Su Ming also recovered a little strength and climbed to the side to help pull together. Soon Su Meng's huge figure emerged from the water. After all this, Su Meng also woke up. He probably drank a lot of water underwater and choked. He lay in the water and coughed violently, shaking the whole cave. Before Su Meng could get ashore completely, the monster in the water had recovered from the mental shock just now and chased after him. In the water, it was its home ground. It swam to Su Meng in a blink of an eye and then half of its body floated out. With the help of the flashlight, Su Meng could see the true face of the monster. This guy was covered with scales and armor, with sharp edges and corners. His long and flat mouth was full of interlaced fangs and sharp teeth. He had 4 short legs like iron pillars, and several hard skins on his back like mountains extended backwards to his big tail. Crocodile, Su Ming's mind buzzed. In the eyes of most people, including Su Ming, an animal friend, crocodiles are definitely one of the most terrifying and ferocious animals, even far surpassing tigers and lions. So, whether in the animal world or the human world, appearance is a very important issue. For example, crocodiles, even a young crocodile with little lethality, looks so ugly and scary at first glance. And like the giant panda, its bite force is second only to the polar bear, its running speed can exceed Lu Xiang's maximum speed on flat ground, and it can climb a tree over 20 meters high. It can use 3 or 4 wolves as cushions to play with. It is obviously a powerful group, but it can make a living by being cute. Zhao Yun didn't even think about it, and quickly pulled out the pistol. He didn't even aim, and raised his hand to shoot quickly and neatly. Bang, a ball of fire flashed from the muzzle, and the sound of the gun echoed in the cave. As expected of a middle-aged old handsome man, no one expected that the usually gentle Zhao Yun could actually shoot a pistol well. The bullet passed between Su Meng's legs and hit the crocodile's back accurately, taking away a small piece of flesh. The crocodile was shot, but it didn't look injured at all. Instead, it was aroused and opened its big mouth to bite Su Meng, who was close at hand. Su Meng was caught off guard and suffered a loss. He was probably depressed. Seeing the crocodile biting, Su Meng suddenly pulled his abdomen backwards with an agility that didn't match his huge body. The crocodile bit nothing and the upper and lower jaws collided fiercely with a loud snap. Next, a shocking scene happened. Su Meng didn't retreat to the shore at all. Instead, he roared and punched down on the head, hitting the crocodile's closed upper jaw. Boom! The ground under his feet seemed to shake. The whole crocodile, the front half of the body was completely hit into the water, and the back half of the body was lifted up like a seesaw. Su Ming sucked in a breath of cold air, and it was painful just to watch. With such a fierce punch, if it was any other animal, even an ordinary crocodile, even if it was not killed directly, it would be knocked unconscious. But this crocodile was indeed a fierce guy who could resist Su Ming's mental power. It actually took advantage of the power of Su Meng's punch, twisted its waist hard, and hit Su Meng's waist with its tail like an iron whip. The huge impact made Su Meng stagger and sit in the water. "Get ashore quickly," Zhao Yun shouted hurriedly on the shore, and raised the rifle in his hand. Since Su Meng was fine, as long as he got ashore, with 2 powerful rifles of him and Su Ming, and Su Meng, the Black King Kong, the crocodile would definitely not be able to get away with it. Su Ming also squeezed out a trace of mental power and input it into Su Meng's body. There was a row of bloody wounds on his legs, probably because he was bitten by the crocodile just now. It was him. If it were someone else, he would probably not be able to save his calf. But Su Meng didn't listen to Zhao Yun at all. Su Ming sent a spiritual force, and he felt refreshed and excited. Instead, he roared and pounced on the crocodile in the water. If this crocodile had intelligence, it would be stunned when seeing Su Meng like this. I've seen fierce, but not so fierce. I've seen people who don't care about their lives, but I've never seen such a psychopath. Bang, another punch, the crocodile was directly hit by Su Meng and fell far into the deep water. Su Meng can also swim. He dived into the water and chased the crocodile. Zhao Yun's jaw almost dropped, and he shouted at Su Meng, "Call your brothers to come up, you are looking for death." No matter how powerful a person is, his fighting power in the water will be greatly reduced, and he can only exert 50% of his 100% strength, but the crocodile is just the opposite. After entering the water, the original 30% strength can also be turned into 100%. But now Su Meng was not so nervous. He knew Su Meng. Su Meng had the instinct and survival ability of a wild animal. His judgment of the situation was often much more accurate than that of humans. If he was not very sure, Su Meng would not rush to chase him. For example, ferocious animals such as lions and tigers would not rush to catch up if they were not sure, even if the opponent looked weak, just an antelope. They would not put themselves in danger. This was the instinct of animals, and it was difficult for humans to learn it no matter how smart they were. After Su Meng went into the water was like a boiling pot. The depth of the pool was only slightly higher than his belly. He was like a patrolling sea demon in the water. Sometimes he stood up and punched with his fists, but sometimes he dived under the water, stirring up the waves violently. "Ah!" Grey Fang roared on the shore, as if cheering. With such a shout, a few things suddenly fell from the hole in the pool. It turned out that there were 2 huskies guarding outside the cave, and a Labrador jumped down to help. Come up, Su Meng hurriedly shouted loudly. This was not something they could help. As for the 2 huskies, Su Meng had seen through them a long time ago. After falling into the water, he didn't need to call them at all. When he saw that the situation was not good, he immediately screamed and fluttered towards the shore. He was a complete coward. However, the smaller Labrador was not far away from Su Meng, swimming around in the water, trying to find an opportunity to join the battle, but was forced to the shore by Su Meng's mental power. This level of battle is not something it can intervene in. Ha ha ha. After the husky came ashore, his eyes were wide open, and he tilted his head to look at the water, with an expression that scared the baby to death. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 206. They are both dogs, but the difference is too big. Su Meng looked at the 2 huskies with disdain. If Wang Kei's-fu was here, maybe he could really help. Even a Chihuahua could be considered ferocious compared to these 2 huskies. The people on the shore felt that time passed very slowly. In fact, it took less than half a minute for the battle in the water to end. Su Meng grabbed the crocodile's tail and walked back to the shore step by step like a dead dog. The crocodile just got out of the water and turned its head to bite Su Meng. Su Meng roared, like a thunder in the cave, and swung his hand, spinning the crocodile in the air and smashing it hard on the ground. With a muffled sound, a large pit in the shape of a crocodile was smashed on the mud. The crocodile was no longer able to resist. It lay in the pit with its limbs spread out, shaking its claws like it had epilepsy. Will it be smashed into an idiot? Su Meng couldn't help swallowing his saliva. Zhao Yun had his eyes open today. He had heard stories about Li Yuanba's arms being as strong as 1,000 pounds, but he thought it was just bragging. The old man in front of him was just a living tyrant. In ancient times, he was a real warrior who could defeat thousands of enemies. But he was older after all. After a moment of surprise, he quickly found a roll of black tape from his backpack and asked Su Meng to press the crocodile's mouth and wrap it up in circles. The bite force of the crocodile was amazing, but it took little effort to open its mouth. Even if it was a giant crocodile of 7 or 8 meters long, as long as an adult pressed its mouth, the crocodile would not be able to open its mouth to bite people. So after catching a crocodile, the first thing to do was to tie up its mouth, instead of tying up its hands and feet like catching a person. Of course, to be on the safe side, Su Ming still tied up the crocodile tightly with a high-strength climbing rope. 3 dogs and a wolf curiously surrounded the crocodile, scratching the crocodile's hard back scales with their front paws from time to time. The husky probably knew that there was no danger, so it simply climbed onto the crocodile's back and squatted, looking up at the sky and making a not-so-authentic wolf howl, with a proud look in his eyes, like a conqueror. "You guys come down, don't kill it, this guy is a national treasure." Su Ming and Zhao Yun observed it for a while and recognized that this crocodile, which was more than 2 meters long, should be a national first-class protected animal, the Yangtze alligator, which is known as a living fossil at the same time as the dinosaurs. In terms of quantity, the Yangtze alligator may be rarer than the Yangtze River dolphin, and there may be only dozens of wild ones. Its status in the Chinese animal world is almost the same as that of the giant panda. But as I said, in this era where everything depends on appearance, the cute giant panda is obviously more popular and more concerned than the fierce-looking crocodile. The Qinling Mountains and the Yangtze River basin have been the habitats of alligators since ancient times. The last time Su Ming went to rescue the finless porpoises, he was still worried about whether there would be alligators in the reed marshes near the abandoned lake. The alligators are actually quite docile in nature and generally do not attack people actively. Even if they do, they rarely kill people. Su Ming was lucky to have encountered an alligator, so he was not seriously injured. Generally, alligators hunt by biting their prey and then violently rolling their bodies to tear the prey into pieces, but alligators are not so violent. Their hunting method sounds quite funny. After biting their prey, if the prey is a land animal, they will drag it into the water to suffocate it, and if the prey is an aquatic animal, they will throw it onto the shore and wait for the prey to die of lack of oxygen. That's why the alligator dragged Su Ming into the water just now. Although alligators have seemingly sharp teeth, they are alveolar teeth. This type of teeth cannot be used for cutting and chewing, and can only clamp prey like a large clamp. Sometimes the prey is too big for it to swallow, so it can only wait for the prey to rot on its own in a very depressed state. In short, if there are cute crocodiles, the Yangtze alligator will definitely be ranked first. Su Ming measured it with a tape measure. This Yangtze alligator is about 2 meters and 3 meters long. It is a giant among the generally smaller Yangtze alligators. It is probably an old guy who has lived for a long time. Because it is a Cretaceous species with a history of nearly 10,000 years, the Yangtze alligator can be regarded as a pseudo-divine beast. In the evolution of 10,000 years, it has almost reached a perfect form, so its mental resistance is so strong. The bloodline of the giant salamander is even older than that of the Yangtze alligator, but it knows how to adapt to the situation. The more powerful a person is, the worse his temper is, and the same is true for animals. The giant salamander was scared in front of Su Ming at the beginning, largely because it was not as fierce as the Yangtze alligator, and the Yangtze alligator was beaten up by Su Ming today, because it was too confident in its own strength and misjudged the situation. It should have fallen from the cave entrance. Zhao Yun pointed to the hole on the water surface not far away, because they just came out of the water and did not find any other fish in the water. This pool is actually a water pit. There is no food for the Yangtze alligator to fill its stomach. It is impossible for it to live in the cave all the time. A lost crocodile? Not necessarily. Su Ming looked back at the depths of the dark cave. After getting on the shore, he found that the space behind the cave was very large, much wider than the karst cave where Su Ming lived before. The wolf-tooth flashlight could not reach the end at all. Maybe there would be some animals in the cave, and it was hard to say whether it would become the food of this Yangtze alligator. I just don't know what strange creatures will appear in this dark cave. Let's bandage Su Meng first. Zhao Yun is good at everything. His skills in applying medicine and bandaging are much better than those of the nurses at the zoo medical center. He applied some medicine to Su Meng's injured calf to prevent inflammation. Then the hands and feet were neatly tied with gauze. Su Meng took this opportunity to shine a flashlight and observe the cave on the shore. Just now I saw that there seemed to be many buildings on the shore. It was only when I got closer that I saw clearly that they were houses. Houses, lots of houses. Near the water's edge, the ground is littered with decayed wooden blocks of all sizes, as well as some stones of various shapes. Some of the nearest houses have completely collapsed, leaving only a foundation, while others have collapsed. Half or one or two of the walls seem to have been crushed by something falling from the sky. Further away, there are 3 rows of houses, probably dozens of them, leading into the distance. From the outside, most of the overall structures are complete. Judging from the architectural style, with cornices, carved beams, and row upon row of buildings, it should be the Jiangnan architectural style of the Ming and Qing dynasties, leaning towards the Hui style. 3 rows of houses, each a few meters apart, form 2 natural underground streets. After Zhao Yun finished bandaging Su Meng, he also used a flashlight to shine inside. After seeing the situation clearly, he took a deep breath. "Uncle Zhao, please don't scare me." Su Meng rolled his eyes. The cave was already eerie, and seeing so many buildings that looked like those in zombie movies, Su Meng actually felt a little nervous all the time, and Zhao Yun sucked in the cool air so fast, it was like sucking. It was like porridge, and there was a whooshing sound in the cave, which startled Su Meng. No, I was surprised. I didn't expect to find an ancient building complex here. So what? Su Meng pointed to the group of Huizhu houses in front and asked anxiously, "Do you think that after we walk past, a lot of zombies will suddenly jump out of the houses on both sides of the street?" "This is possible in a film and television city." Zhao Yun smiled, and then explained, "If you don't do antique research, you don't know the value of this building complex. There may not be any particularly valuable cultural relics here, but this building kun is the epitome of a village in an era, and it is a huge cultural treasure in itself." "Uncle Zhao, please stop beating me." "Don't worry, I can't possibly tear down these houses and resell them," Su Meng said. Zhao Yun flashed the flashlight a few more times, pondered for a moment, and said, "I probably guessed that this is not an ancient tomb at all. It should have been a village or a town or something. It was built on the mountainside and was flooded by flash floods. It was very maybe part of the town was washed down the mountain many years ago, and what we see now is the part that survived the disaster. When we go in later, you must be careful and try not to bang any buildings in the town. Since they have been washed away by flash floods and have been underground for so many years, these buildings are already very unstable and will easily collapse if a little external force is applied." Zhao Yun was probably attracted by this rare underground building and couldn't wait to go deeper. Su Meng was doing better. There was an injury on his leg, but it didn't hinder his movement. Grey Tooth could be of help. Although the Labrador was not big, he was born as a hunting dog and could be carried around. As for the 2 Hutchies, forget it, it's better to keep them with you to save these 2 guys from causing any trouble. Su Meng used his mental power to explore the old alligator. This guy was beaten to death and was left with only 1 breath left. He was unable to resist. It seems that he is not dead yet. Bundle him up and leave him here. When he comes back, he will find a way to take him back to the zoo. There happens to be a shortage of animals in the aquarium. Go back and let him. It is a neighbor with finless porpoises and giant salamanders." So 3 people, 3 dogs, and a wolf walked slowly into the buildings along a street on the left. When Zhao Yun said that it was not an ancient tomb, but a mountain village, Su Meng felt even more dangerous. An ancient tomb can only contain 1 or 2 people buried there, but if a village is washed away by a flash flood, how many dead people must be inside? There is also a movie called Mountain Village Old Corpse. Zhao Yun was really speechless and said, "You young people, why can't you be a little more materialistic? All the Marxist politics classes have been in vain? You have to find a few zombie monsters or something before you give up." Because monsters are valuable, Su Ming gave an explanation that even Zhao Yun really found to be reasonable. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 207. Su Ming has seen the terracotta warriors and horses before. If compared in terms of scale, the terracotta warriors and horses must be much larger and more shocking than the surrounding underground town. You must know that the terracotta warriors and horses are buried with Qin Shi Huang and can be regarded as the most luxurious and high-end tombs in China. One of them. However, the feeling of visiting the terracotta warriors and horses is completely different from walking in person in this underground complex that has not yet been discovered by the world. The surroundings are pitch black, and the silence is so suffocating that one feels suffocated. On both sides are gloomy ancient houses from the Ming and Qing dynasties. In this kind of environment, there is no atmosphere of humanities and art at all. Instead, it makes people feel uncomfortable, as if there is something terrifying hidden behind every door and every wall, watching them coldly at the door. "Can you please stop scaring yourself? I'm a little scared by what you said." Zhao Yun waved the flashlight on Su Ming's face and said angrily. He was standing in front of a house, shining his flashlight on a mottled copper wind chime under the eaves, studying it with some concentration. Su Ming stood behind him and kept talking about ghosts and monsters. Strength. Based on Zhao Yun's experience, it is of course clear that there cannot be any ghosts in this kind of place. At most, a few mummies will be found. It was frightening, and in this dark underground environment, Su Ming kept chattering, and Zhao Yun couldn't stand it. "It's really scary. Look around here. You don't even need makeup to shoot a ghost movie," Su Ming said, shaking his flashlight around. The flashlight flashed across a house opposite, and Su Ming noticed that there seemed to be something in the house. He subconsciously moved the flashlight back and pointed it at the door of the house. "It doesn't matter if you don't look at it." Su Ming's scalp buzzed and exploded when he looked at it. The door had collapsed, and when the flashlight shone in, I saw a figure standing behind a screen facing the door. The figure stretched its hands straight to both sides and stood motionless behind the screen, but it didn't even have a head. If Su Ming hadn't peed by the water just now, Su Ming would have almost peed in fear. His legs softened and he hugged Zhao Yun. He hung on Zhao Yun like a koala and said with a sad face, "Is there a ghost behind the screen?" Zhao Yun lifted Su Ming up with one hand, and then walked quietly through the street full of gravel and mud, and came to the door of the house opposite. He stood in front of the threshold and observed for a moment. Before confirming that this room after the room was still strong, he walked directly into the room, turned around, and disappeared behind the screen. Seeing Zhao Yun disappear into the darkness without saying a word from beginning to end, Su Ming's heart skipped a beat. Damn it, isn't this old guy a ghost? While thinking about it, he sent a burst of mental power towards Gray Fang, asking him to follow him and go behind the screen to take a look. Even if there are ghosts, they shouldn't eat wolves, right? Hui Ya was not afraid at all. He was about to walk into the opposite room, but before he could enter the door, another figure flashed out from behind the screen. It was Zhao Yun. Zhao Yun put the flashlight in his mouth, walked out with a robe in his hand, unfolded it in front of Su Ming, and asked vaguely, "Is this what you saw?" The robe was shabby, but it could still be seen that it was similar to the shadow he saw on the screen just now. Su Ming was also speechless. He shined the flashlight on the screen again, and sure enough there was no human figure on it. It turns out that the figure that Su Ming saw just now was just the robe hanging on the screen. "I told you a long time ago, don't be suspicious. Where is the consciousness of your party members?" Zhao Yun spread the big robe flat on the ground gently, for fear that the movement would damage the already rotten robe. Terrible ancient clothes. This is a costume from the mid-Qing dynasty. It seems that this small village has lasted here for hundreds of years, Zhao Yun said as he took out a few small fluorescent flags from his backpack and placed them on the ground around the clothes to make a pattern. A simple protective measure was taken to prevent someone from accidentally stepping on this piece of clothing if it was too dark. The person living in this room must be a woman, Su Ming said angrily, pointing to the house opposite. Well? How can you see it? Zhao Yun asked curiously. Only women can hang their clothes so neatly, Su Ming said. Zhao Yun thought about it thoughtfully and nodded, that makes sense. After doing all this, Zhao Yun returned to the mansion where he was just standing, put on his gloves, and gently pushed the door. The door creaked and slowly opened on both sides, and an unpleasant smell wafted out from behind the door. Let's go and take a look at this house. It looks like this is the largest room here. It may be the home of the clan leader and village chief. There may be some valuable things in it. Be gentle and don't touch it. Zhao Yun gave a few instructions, then tiptoed into the door, and Su Ming followed him in. Even though there was not a single ghost in the house in front of him, the two people acted like thieves, causing them to follow him. Su Ming, who was behind, also imitated the two of them and walked in on tiptoes. Behind the gate, there is also a screen, but it is made of stone. Going around the screen, there is a yard about the same size as the waterside pavilion platform. When I shine it with a flashlight, I can see that there is a large water tank in the middle of the yard. In ancient times, wealthy people would place this kind of wealth-gathering tank in the front yard, with fish in it, to attract wealth and ensure safety. Su Ming went over and took a look. The water in the water tank had dried up long ago, but there was mostly black stuff in the tank. He didn't know if it was mud or something else. Zhao Yun took out a tool that looked like a long-handled spoon from his backpack and stirred it in the large vat. Suddenly, a foul smell came to his nose, mixed with a very pungent smell. Su Ming covered his nose and frowned, saying, "Is this not a urine bucket?" Zhao Yun was standing closest, and was dizzy and dazed by the sudden strange smell. He subconsciously took a big step back, vomited twice, and then said, "How is it possible? Your family puts the urine bucket in the yard for the guests coming in and out to smell it. Maybe the owner of this house wants to grow vegetables in the yard and use this large vat to collect artificial fertilizer. If that's the case, Uncle Zhao, you just used this shit-stirring stick to stir a vat of hundreds of years of shit and urine," Su Ming said with disgust, pointing at the long-handled spoon in Zhao Yun's hand. Zhao Yun was disgusted by what he said, and he quickly rubbed the long-handled spoon on the ground twice, and said in a strange way, "What on earth is this, so smelly? It does smell like feces, but who would come here to poop in a large water tank? Even if the owner of this house had the habit of pooping in the large tank in the yard, decades and hundreds of years have passed. No matter how much shit there is in the large tank, it should be dry. It is impossible to emit such a foul smell, let alone still wet. And now, in front of them, there is a large tank of fresh and hot shit. Uncle Zhao, don't scare me, Su Ming has a rich imagination." Hearing what Zhao Yun said, he immediately shrank his neck in fear and subconsciously turned his head to look around. It seems that at any time, someone will run out of the dark room inside with his pants up, and jump onto the large tank to take a dip in front of them. This is too weird. It may not be feces, maybe it's rotten leaves and branches or something. The underground environment is humid, so it's normal to have moisture. Materialist Zhao Yun once again gave an explanation that sounded reasonable. But Su Ming always felt uneasy. If it wasn't feces, it would be better. If it was, then the problem would be serious. They are now underground, in an ancient town that was buried hundreds of years ago. If this tank is really fresh shit, then it can only mean one thing: someone lives here. Who would live in such a place? Not even a savage like Su Ming. And just now they entered the ruins of the ancient town all the way, and didn't see any traces of human life at all. Zhao Yun also realized the seriousness of the problem. Even if he really encountered zombies and savages, he might not be afraid. He was afraid of encountering tomb robbers. Once they met in such a place, the two sides would be a life and death fight. The two were alert and had already drawn their guns. Zhao Yun pointed the gun at the main room in the yard and said, "Let's go to the house behind first." After that, he suddenly added, "If you really encounter a situation, don't hesitate or talk too much, just shoot. It's better for others to die than for us." "Hey, Uncle Zhao didn't realize that you have learned the true teachings of the protagonist of the online novel," Su Ming said with sincere admiration. Zhao Yun. This chapter has fewer words, 2,500, please forgive me for not being able to do it anymore. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 208. There are mottled walls on both sides of the courtyard. At the other end, there is a large room, which is the main hall of this house. There are almost no tiles on the roof, revealing the staggered beams. Below is a row of half-open wooden doors. The window paper of the wooden doors has long been rotten and hung on the window panes in tatters. Fortunately, there is no wind underground, otherwise it will definitely make a very scary humming sound when blown by the wind. Now Su Ming and Zhao Yun are both nervous, and they are very nervous at the slightest disturbance. Only Su Ming, this guy probably doesn't know how to write the word fear and has no curiosity about the surrounding environment. It's almost like going home. You ruin the atmosphere too much. Is it easy for me to create a scary atmosphere? Su Ming looked at him helplessly. The three of them, one in front and two behind, tiptoed to the bottom of the big house and listened carefully through the door. There was no movement inside. Zhao Yun then made a gesture and gently pushed a wooden door with his gloved hand. The wooden door creaked, making an ear-piercing sound, and slowly opened inwards. Two flashlights followed closely behind, falling into the dark room. The flashlight flashed in the room, and I saw a hall in front of me. In the center of the room, there was a square table, and on both sides of the table, there were two empty armchairs. On the square table, there were three four-legged plates in a row, like offerings, but the plates were also empty, with nothing in them. In front of the table, there were two rows of chairs side by side, like a meeting hall for a large family. From the shape of these chairs, it can be imagined that when this town still existed, although it was remote, it was still a place of knowledge and reason, and it might be a prominent family in the local area. The room was divided into two parts, front and back, by a screen wall, which was connected to the winter melon beams on the roof. Seeing the round winter melon beams, I confirmed my previous judgment. This kind of beam is very troublesome to build. It is made of a whole piece of high-quality wood. It is not afraid of snakes, insects, rats and ants. It can last for hundreds of years. It is definitely not something that ordinary farmers can afford. The square table and the armchair are just below the screen wall. There is a plaque hanging on the top of the screen wall. The plaque is covered with dust, and even the original words are almost covered. Su Ming can only see 4 words on the plaque, but he can't see the content clearly. On both sides of the plaque, on the round column beside the screen wall, there is a couplet carved. There is not much dust on it, so the words can be seen clearly, but the words are written in a dragon and phoenix style, which should be cursive script. The light is dim, and Su Ming glanced at it and most of them don't recognize it. Su Ming didn't recognize it, but Zhao Yun was a professional in this field. He walked into the house gently, shone the flashlight on the plaque and the 2 couplets, moved slowly, and read them softly in his mouth. It seems that the owner of this house here is not an ordinary citizen, but a military commander during the Ming dynasty, Zhao Yun said with 70% certainty. A military commander? Su Ming was puzzled and asked, didn't they say that these are all civilian houses? Zhao Yun looked at the pair of junk that he had taken to Zhao Yun for appraisal before, and said that the patterns on them were used by ordinary people. Just now, after arriving at this underground building, judging from the specifications of the houses along the way, they were all ordinary people, not nobles. It's nothing more than a wealthy family. In ancient times, the class system was strict. No matter how rich ordinary people were, they could not use the objects of nobles, otherwise it would be beyond the rules. Chow Kongli said that it was a capital crime. The larger the family, the more attention they paid to this point. No one wanted to ruin the entire family because of such a small mistake. Zhao Yun thought for a moment and said, maybe they are retired officials who have returned to their hometowns to retire, or maybe they have committed crimes and have been stripped of their official titles and exiled to their hometowns. In short, judging from these two couplets, the owner of this house should have been on the battlefield and had military merit. It's not that they use the specifications of aristocrats. Su Ming didn't understand these things very well. Anyway, he just listened to what Lao Zhao said. Whether it was a military general or a civil official, as long as there were no zombies or monsters, he was not afraid. As he was looking around, there was a rustling sound behind the screen wall, like something was dragging on the ground. The sound was not loud, but the room was too quiet, and it fell clearly into the ears of Zhao Yun and Su Ming. Both of them almost thought they had heard it wrong. At the same time, they turned their heads and looked at each other, but they saw surprise in each other's eyes, and then they were sure that they had not heard it wrong. Almost at the same time, Hui Ya suddenly arched his back and roared at the back of the screen wall. Usually Zhao Yun and Su Ming would talk and laugh, and even tell some nonsensical jokes, but at the critical moment, they both immediately reacted almost identically. After being startled, the two of them rushed out at the same time, dodging around the large screen wall to the left and right, and came to the back room. Behind the screen wall was a half-empty house, with some shelves, pots and other things, and a few pots of dried flowers. On one side was a corner door leading to the backyard, and on the other side was a room, and the sound came from the room. When the flashlight was shown, there was a long dragging mark on the dusty ground, leading to the door. It was just a blink of an eye. Su Ming and Zhao Yun took a deep breath and rushed into the room at the same time. When the flashlight flashed, it turned out to be a bedroom in front of them. Next to a large bed, there was a large copper mirror more than 1 person tall. The copper mirror had been rusted so badly that it could not reflect light even when the flashlight was shown on it. When the flashlight flashed, something seemed to flash by, and Su Ming subconsciously moved the flashlight to the side, only to see a thin figure standing with his back to them. The man was wearing a dark red robe, facing the direction of the big bed and the mirror, and seemed to be looking at his own reflection. Su Ming's heart was pounding wildly, and he thought he had mistaken the clothes hanging for people again. Since this was a bedroom, it was not surprising to see clothes hanging on the hanger, so he subconsciously reached out to grab the red robe. As soon as he stretched out his hand, Zhao Yun suddenly yelled, "Pull back." From Zhao Yun's position, he could see clearly that this time it was not clothes at all, but real people. The man had 2 high buns on his head, which made the back of his head look extremely long, like a ghost with a hat, and his shoulders were slightly shrugged, as if he was sobbing silently. This is not a Chinese ghost story. A crying woman in red clothes suddenly appeared in the underground ancient house and faced them with the back of her head. It's not a good thing. In this kind of situation in the movie, the woman usually turns around and reveals a pale face. P.S. This paragraph does not count towards the paid word count. Today I found 2 more helmsmen, and I was going to add more chapters. But suddenly I saw a classmate said that the reward for updating 10 chapters is 50,000. My heart was beating wildly for the commemorative coins. 50,000 starting coins is one aspect, but more importantly, I feel that everyone is too enthusiastic, which makes me very encouraged. It means that as long as I work hard, everyone is also strong enough. There is a reward for hard work. But 10 chapters, God, where can I get 10 chapters? I wrote all day after posting on Sunday, and I still have 10,000 words in reserve. It turns out that I want to keep some for precaution, and wait until the average subscription is 1,500 before bursting out 10 chapters. But seeing everyone so enthusiastic, I am quite excited about the commemorative coins. Let me try my best. We will still do what we did on the first day of becoming AV, with a minimum of 2,000 words per chapter. I will try to write some at night, and see if I can find time to write more during the day tomorrow. With the current drafts, it would be best if I can write 10 chapters in the end. If I can't write them, don't be disappointed. After writing, I will set a scheduled release, starting at 7 a.m., one chapter every 15 minutes. Let's try. Finally, I still ask for a genuine subscription, recommendation, and monthly ticket. If the results are good, maybe I can get a good recommendation from the client, all thanks to everyone. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 209. It took only a moment for Zhao Yun to realize something was wrong and to yell. In a flash, Su Ming's hand had already touched the woman's shoulder. He felt his hand go empty, and the woman's shoulder suddenly collapsed. You, Su Ming was frightened by Zhao Yun's roar and the sudden collapse of his shoulder. He cursed and stepped back 3 or 4 steps, his back pressed tightly against the screen wall, and his body was covered with white sweat. The woman turned her head suddenly, and Su Ming couldn't see what she looked like. From a distance, he could only see a pale face covered with white hair, and 2 black eyeballs bulging out, which was extremely creepy. It was a standard. From the back, he wanted to commit a crime; from the front, he wanted to defend himself. Zhao Yun showed his ruthless side, and immediately shot the red-clothed man in the thigh without saying a word. Bang! The bullet hit the back of the red-dressed woman's clothes accurately, but the woman seemed to be floating in the air, not affected at all. The bullet made a hole in her skirt, passed through, and hit one leg of the big bed with a puff. The big bed had been decayed for hundreds of years, and it could barely be placed here because it was not subjected to external force. After being hit by the bullet, the bed leg was shattered and the big bed collapsed. Maybe this big bed was the favorite of the red-dressed woman, or a bed for sleeping. She was immediately angry, and her head turned more than 100 degrees, and she let out a shrill howl at Zhao Yun. The sound pierced the eardrums, just like the ghost screams used to scare people on the internet. The woman's mouth was originally swollen, bulging high, and when she opened her mouth, her whole face suddenly split from it, and a big black hole seemed to appear on her white-haired face. In the black hole, there were interlaced fangs. "Uncle Zhao, you ruined my dowry." When people are scared to the extreme, some will collapse, while others will become numb. Su Ming belongs to the latter. Now he is not afraid. He just roared, raised his rifle, and smashed the woman's mouth with the butt of the rifle. This time he hit her, but the feeling from the rifle was very light. It didn't seem like he hit a person, but it was like hitting a balloon, light and fluttering. Strangely enough, the woman was not afraid of bullets. She was hit in the face by Su Ming's butt of the rifle, but she fell to the ground. Before Su Ming and the others could catch her, the woman crawled on the ground and turned back to Su Ming and let out a shrill howl. Then she used her hands and feet, like a reptile, to quickly drill into a corner door of the room and escaped from the room. The agility of her movements made Su Ming think of the zombies in Resident Evil. Su Ming and Zhao Yun took 2 steps to catch up, lifted the curtain of the corner door and followed. Behind them was another courtyard. There seemed to be paths on both sides of the courtyard leading to the side courtyard. The surrounding walls were mostly damaged, and one wall was collapsed. But the woman had disappeared without a trace, and no one knew where she had gone. The whole process actually took only a few seconds. At this time, Su Meng, Hui Ya and the three dogs followed into the room and barked wildly at the courtyard behind. Hui Ya was about to chase after them with his teeth bared, but was pulled back by Su Ming's neck. "It's not a rabbit. Maybe it's a female ghost or something. It's not within your business scope," Su Ming said to Hui Ya. Hui Ya twisted and turned, and his two wolf ears swayed left and right like a fan, obviously very unhappy. "It's no use being unhappy, just stay here obediently," Su Ming threw it aside, then looked at Zhao Yun again, and said with lingering fear, "Uncle Zhao, can you use Marx's materialistic ideas to explain to me what that thing was just now?" Although Zhao Yun just yelled and fired decisively, as if he was fearless, in fact, it was all a stress response. To be honest, it was the first time he encountered such a situation. His face was so scared that it turned blue, and he was leaning against the wall and gasping for breath. Hearing Su Ming's question, he said confidently, "How do I know?" Marx also believed in God. In this situation, we can only ask God. God can't cure Chinese ghosts. Just now, at a glance, Su Ming could be sure that the woman could not be a human. Not even a savage, even if it was Su Ming, he would not crawl on the ground with all four limbs like a dog, and how could a human grow his mouth so big, even more exaggerated than the split-mouthed woman? Besides, Zhao Yun's shot hit the woman's leg firmly. Even Su Ming would stagger if he was hit by a bullet. That woman, let's call her a woman for now. She was skinny and looked fine after being shot. Even Su Ming, who was fearless, was now at a loss. Only Huiya and the three dogs were walking around the room. Not only were they not afraid, but they were excited. They stuck their butts out and wagged their tails, sniffing around the room. Finally, they all gathered beside the collapsed big bed and sniffed the remains of the bed. The bedding on the bed had long been rotten into slag, and the wood was rotten beyond recognition. A big footprint would sink when stepped on. I don't know what they could smell. Could they rely on the smell of the bed to catch the woman in red? You have read a lot of novels about ghosts and gods. Can you guess what that was just now? I don't think it looks like a ghost. Zhao Yun was a little confused. What Zhao Yun said made sense. Thinking back carefully, Su Ming also felt that something was wrong. Although the woman was scary, she was just ugly and her screams were scary. She didn't seem to have any killing power. On the contrary, she was knocked down by his gun butt and fled in embarrassment. If ghosts are so weak, then there is nothing to be afraid of. However, from this point of view, the big tank of shit in the front yard just now was probably the masterpiece of this woman in red. If it was a ghost, it shouldn't need to poop, right? It must be a very special creature. Su Ming automatically thought about it. A woman with a split mouth in a big red robe, lifting her robe, squatting on the edge of the water tank like an acrobat and defecating, the scene made him feel nauseous. Whether it was a human, a ghost, or something else, it was not a solution for Su Ming and his friends to stay in this room, so they returned to the front yard. Just as he took a step out of the door, a shrill cry suddenly sounded again from behind a few walls not far away, exactly the same as the cry of the woman in red just now. Immediately afterwards, the same shrill screams rang out one after another from all directions of the yard, almost everywhere, and the ghost screams one after another echoed in the entire underground ancient town. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 210. Su Ming and Zhao Yun were completely dumbfounded, and their scalps felt numb for a while. Judging from the sounds, the entire underground complex was filled with women in red almost everywhere, completely surrounding the courtyard where they were. There were probably more than 100, maybe even hundreds. I'm just telling you, there might be a lot of little monsters jumping out of this place. Uncle Zhao, you still despise me, Su Ming said angrily. Zhao Yun was also depressed. He never thought that so many ghosts could appear in an ordinary Ming and Qing building complex. It can't be explained by common sense. Okay, I'm wrong, Donkey's dog thing, what the hell is this? In desperation, Zhao Yun, who has always been gentle and elegant, actually cursed with a curse word, and it was quite unpleasant. It can be seen that he was also panicked. No matter how much fighting power that ghost woman had, she couldn't stand up to many. Dozens and hundreds of them came together. Each of them bit him to death with one bite. Screams were heard all around. The screams were miserable and sharp. They were not the screams of animals at all. They were almost exactly the same as the electronically synthesized ghost screams in movies. The noise made people feel frightened. Su Ming took a deep breath and said, "Uncle Zhao, if it doesn't work, let's break out and go back to the top first." They were surrounded from all directions, and they were now completely trapped in this room. It was not easy to break out, but there was no other way now. Zhao Yun stuck the flashlight on his hat, held the rifle with both hands, and said, "Okay, I rush out first, Su Meng and the wolf will follow you, and the dog will follow me. Then we will run separately and meet at the entrance of the cave." After saying that, he was about to walk out. Before Zhao Yun could even take a step out of the door, Hui Ya and the three dogs suddenly rushed out of the yard, roared and rushed towards the direction where the barking was the loudest, and then dived into the ancient houses on both sides of the street. "What's wrong?" Zhao Yun was so anxious that he was sweating. He knew that Su Ming had a deep relationship with these animals, and he probably wouldn't give up on them and run for his life. Su Ming wanted to curse loudly at first, but then he suddenly had an idea and immediately stopped Zhao Yun. "Maybe we found something. Let's take a look and talk about it." After that, the two of them held up their guns and stood side by side, which was quite strong walls, watching with vigilance on both sides of the door. After Grey Fang and the others rushed out, the screams in the darkness became more and more shrill, with wolves howling and dogs barking among them. Furniture was knocked over in several rooms. It seemed that something was going on. Have a fierce battle. Black shadows kept coming out of the house, as if they didn't care about gravity at all, nimbly jumping up to the roof and jumping around in weird postures. Although the battle was fierce, it only lasted for a few minutes. The battle was over. The howls in the darkness gradually became less and less. Occasionally, they rang out a few times, and they were further away than before. It seemed that the monsters were being killed by Grey Fang and the others. Scared away. Not long after, a few small spots of light lit up in the darkness, and Grey Fang and the others trotted back, seeming to be holding something very long in their mouths, floating around. Caught, Su Ming looked from a distance, like the woman in red. When I got closer, I discovered that a wolf and three-headed dog were lined up in a row, biting the head, waist and legs of the woman in red. The woman was so soft that she seemed to have no bones, and most of her body was dragged on the ground. He was said to be a human being, but when he shined a flashlight on it, Su Ming suddenly realized. In fact, this is just a piece of clothing. It has no body at all, only a head. No wonder Zhao Yun's shot didn't work. Hui Ya opened his mouth and threw the woman's head in front of Su Ming. The head was still trying to run away, but Su Ming grabbed the two bundles on the head and lifted it up. Using the light of a flashlight, I saw that this was not a head, but a rather cute-looking animal. This guy is probably smaller than Grey Fang and about the same size as a cat. He is furry all over, has a long mouth, and a few mustaches around his mouth. His small black eyes narrow when the light shines on them. There is a seam and it looks lazy. As for what Su Ming is grabbing, it is not a bun at all, but two big ears that look like cattail leaf fans, almost like rabbit ears. They are long and pointed. If they were not grabbed but unfolded, they would be like a big banana leaf, even bigger than this little guy's entire body. "Oh, I understand, you little scoundrel," You are hiding in red clothes, standing on the bed, scaring us, right? That big vat of Rixiang in the yard is obviously you, oh your masterpiece. Su Ming laughed. It turned out that everything he saw just now was caused by this guy. Probably it got into that red dress, and then stood on the bed, with only its head exposed. From the back, it looked like a standing person. In fact, except for the head on the neck, the clothes are empty. Su Ming was frightened just now, and now he caught the other person. He grabbed the little thing's ears and shook it a few times as if to retaliate. The little guy was obviously very angry. His mouth suddenly grew so big that he wanted to scream. Su Ming he suddenly pinched its mouth with his other hand, and the cry suddenly turned into a muffled sound of oh 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 oh. There were still occasional ghost screams in the surroundings, but at this time, Zhao Yun and Su Ming finally felt relieved. It turns out that they are just a large group of small animals living underground. They have no lethality. They don't even need to attack at all. Greifang and the others can take care of them all. Especially, Su Ming was not worried at all. He was a friend of animals. If there were 2 zombies, he might flee in panic. But even if there were 10,000 of these big-eared little guys, it would be useless. This little guy was not stupid. After being caught, he twisted his body and found that he was no match for the big guy in front of him. He immediately gave up resistance. His dark eyes rolled around and he actually put his 2 front paws together, like a human bowing, and kept bowing to Su Ming. His eyes suddenly became pitiful. His big furry tail hung under his body, sweeping back and forth, as if begging Su Ming to let him go. You were so brotherly just now, and now you start to act cute again. You are really cunning, Su Ming grinned at the little guy. What kind of animal is this? Zhao Yun also came over to look, very curious. This little guy looks like a fox, but his ears are longer than a rabbit, and he is not as insidious as an ordinary fox. At first glance, he looks a bit like a big squirrel. As Zhao Yun spoke, he stretched out a finger and tickled the little guy's belly. The little guy squirmed back and forth because of the itch.